This might be the first intro I've done to a video, which is ironic because in his review of this channel, Collective Dismal did mention that characteristic, but I've seen a threefold increase in my subscriber base thanks to Collective Dismal's excellent review of this channel. Big thanks to him for all that work. It's tough being a one-man show. I know he knows. I really enjoyed his review video, and I enjoy all his others too. Synchronicities are those little coincidences we notice. We are geared for pattern recognition. And it seems like a shift in perception is accompanied by noticed coincidences. The seeing of number patterns and echoes of themes in seemingly unrelated incidents. Time Life Books had a series called Mysteries of the Unexplained. It gave a lot of examples of what would be synchronicities. Like a woman burns her hand on one side of the country, and then her mother on the other side feels a pain. When those books were written, we were far more remote to each other. A long-distance phone line that you had to pay for by the minute was the best you could do without traveling before the ubiquity of computers with broadband internet. It was easier for people to cultivate the fondness that comes with absence. There can be unprecedented perceptions when attention is given more fully to the present. Things that shouldn't be known are somehow known, but there's no way to know if that foreknowledge was only coincidence. You hear a word in your head, and then the person talking to you says it, and it was a non sequitur, not a word that could be anticipated. A possession of yours is being violated outside of your view, but then you get an anger for which there is no object or thought to trigger it. The utility of such observations is in the connections they reveal between the owner and the property. Every piece of property has a mental counterpart in the inventory of thoughts, and the more important the item, the more often it gets revisited and given the energy that follows attention. The imaginary kingdom of possessions is filled by the energy that follows attention. But its one point of failure is belief in being the owner of all this stuff. If there's no sense of being anything other than an observer of objects rather than a perceivable owner of them, then the idea of them is no more fretted over than a stranger's possessions. All items need not be relinquished for liberation to occur, only that the identification with the one to own them be lost. That said, you may lose the impetus to use the items for not ruminating on them, and for not seeing enough upside relative to one's current state. If there's a high baseline of uncaused happiness, it alters the cost-benefit analysis of a potential action or undertaking. In such analysis, the cost side of the equation is weighted against the incremental happiness brought by the action, not the total happiness reached. The action in consideration gets no credit for the happiness that was already there when it was being considered, unless it is somehow known to be complementary to something else going on, such that it's synergistically enhanced. So one who abides in a walking samadhi will be less hungry for excitement. There is less interest in giving awareness over to content with an unconscious agenda. There is no need to wrestle with other people's thoughts. They are paid to shape your mind. They understand conditioning and influence, and to give one's mind over to them is to abdicate the formation of your mind to people who want to exploit you and don't care what happens to you. If you look around the world, you'll see plenty of countries where most people live in marginal conditions and nobody really cares. America is full of people who have fallen through the cracks. To one degree or another, we are all like the Grizwold's dog tied to the bumper of the family truckster. The car just keeps going faster and faster. The difficulty of life seems to go up with each generation since the post-war boom. In economics, there's a thing called the law of one price. It says that in the absence of transportation costs, identical goods will have the same price everywhere. It's because all arbitrage opportunities will be exploited until the prices are equalized if there's no transportation cost. Through technology and legislation, globalism seeks to impose the law of one price on labor. And of course, technology is displacing workers and always has been. When there's a greater supply of labor, you're competing against a bigger bell curve. So not only are people making less money, they're having to compete with more people for every job. And the massive monetary expansion that's happened since you-know-what has all gone into real estate and other assets. Inflation hits wages last, the Cantillon effect. All this is to say that people who are asking you to make sacrifices are not making those sacrifices themselves. And so it's best not to give your consciousness over to their proxies in the media. Before the internet, as well as the extreme consolidation of mainstream media, people had limited access to information about people they saw on TV and in movies. A lot could be left to the imagination, and people would think the best of the celebrity with whom they had a parasocial relationship. Celebrities have about as much freedom of expression as a middle manager does on their LinkedIn account. Not only can they not say certain things if they want to work, they can be compelled to speak out against their own conscience on issues. This is much easier to see in this age of everyone can talk to everyone. There's good reason to consider whether or not someone who's trying to persuade you is being compelled to do so. Not just monetarily compensated, but compelled, either through the threat of being blackballed or worse. The controllers of such people have difficulty respecting the independence of others. What they do to others, they will do to you if the same circumstance arises. They would not be able to get consent by referendum for what they want to accomplish, but by virtue of consenting to yield one's senses to them, and thus one's consciousness, they're conditioning the viewer to work towards their goals, their own interests. If you've been programmed by institutions, and it's not hard to know if this is the case, just consider whether or not all your views agree with theirs. Media zombies live like in a little bubble of certainty about humanity's control over things and the rightness and righteousness of their views. Media conditioning wants to create the illusion of control, that all they predict is a foregone conclusion. They want you to believe in the experts they paid to support their views. Meanwhile, suppress any experts with divergent views, regardless of whether they have merit. They make all dissenters out to be bumpkins or cretins or quacks. Guard the senses from coercive people. Don't lend them your eyes, ears, mind, and energy. They can and will shape you without your conscious knowledge of it, if you consent to let them condition you. People do tend to accept and defend the first idea about a thing. It's not to say that this is always the case with every idea, but as is evidenced by geographical distribution of religion, on average, people accept ideas on a first come, first served basis.